Good day, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Alex Saz Show here at the Glen Zone with Glenn Herring and a super special guest all the way from California. Let me read you his twist. Let me read you his tweet with a twist. Joe Biden just ordered reservists to active duty because Zelensky asked him for more American money and troops. In other words, America's sons and daughters may be sent and to fight and possibly die in the war that only benefits Joe Biden and the global elite. So if you voted for Joe Biden because you hated Trump, this is your fault. And it is. Say goodbye to your kids as they march off to fight and die in the war that has nothing to do with an American interest. And if you wanted McCarthy as your speaker because he said pretty words, say thank you to the man who flat out refused to impeach Biden so Biden could send your kids to the war. Politics should never be just a game we play against each other. Voting has consequences, and Biden is about to make our children collateral damage in the war we didn't even vote for. God bless America. And it's true, brothers and sisters, God bless America. The last hope the world has. I mean, if we still believe in some sort of polarity and there's left, right, Trump is the savior or whoever, truly America is the last place of freedom. If the Constitution still means anything to us, I mean, it means something to me, especially the First Amendment, and that's why we're doing this show, to be free, to continue to promote the freedom and to continue to promote the sanity that's very little nowadays. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce this guy. He's a badass, right? His name is James Bradley. And James, I'm so glad we met. And James happened to catch one of our episodes that we actually did a few weeks ago on fires. And he was asking questions like, what's happening up there with Trudeau and all this BlackRock collusion and, all this corruption that we have here. And, and obviously James can feel it himself because CA and CA, California abbreviated to CA and Canada abbreviated to CA. But it might as well be the same country. So without further ado, James, how you doing, my friend?
Oh, great. Thanks for inviting me. Been waiting for a while now. So,
well, you know how we here we're half frozen here in Canada. It takes us a long time to do things,
Well, that too, but also I've been censored because I do kind of the badass. So they don't want me in any media these days. Keep away, avoid Bradley at all costs. And there's a good reason for that, because I call it right out. And I'm glad we met, by the way, and we're becoming good friends over time. But I won't
go ahead.
But I wanted to talk about this Operation Atlantic Resolve, and that's basically with these 3,000 not to exceed in one time. And we know that one time turns into 2, 3, 4, 5, hundreds of times. So currently we're at 100,000 in there in that theater. And the blistering remarks and comments that I made was because I know what's going on the ground. I saved a family, actually a high-ranking official out of Kyiv. And he told me, and hopefully in one of the next episodes, we're going to bring him on so you can hear from him where your money is going. The Canadian tax dollars and the American tax dollars are going. And only 10%, at least the time when I spoke with him, goes to the war effort. Where does that 90% go? We're going to talk about that. But anyway, there you go. And if you want, I can go on about the military perspective and how weak this is and what's going to happen with these cluster bombs and this constant and the potential threat of them going into NATO, which seems to be in play. And that's going to be the biggest, that'll be the start of World War III right there.
Well, Glenn, how you doing, man? Straight to the point, Glenn. How you doing, my champ?
I'm doing very good. This is going to be an interesting segment here with James all the way from California. It's the first time we do this live on the Alex Saz Show. And we're rookies at this, but we become pros very quickly.
So it's interesting, Glenn, that we always mention this in our show that, like we all, and it's interesting to hear from the horse's mouth, it's coming. James, we actually want to know more about your military accolades because you do have a military background. So you're not just making this stuff up and pulling this out of your backside, or you are internet, warrior type of thing. You actually know what you're talking about. Tell us a little bit to our audience about your background in military, please.
Okay, sure. I'll tell you about my recent deployment. This is more of a citizen soldier perspective during the heels of the fall of Kabul and the betrayal that Biden did to those that served alongside the American or U.S. military and the other armed forces. I put together a nonprofit to get the boots on the ground to save the U.S. citizens that remain left behind, as well as those vetted allies. So that was my last deployment. I kind of worked it from the Combat Information Center, if you will, put everyone together, amass the resources to get them out. That was the key thing. Met with massive resistance from the Biden administration, so another discussion point. But I served in the United States Coast Guard, and our primary mission was search and rescue, law enforcement, also, yes, human and child trafficking. So we can talk about that too when we have a moment. And I'm very involved in that, working with the folks you probably saw, Sound of Freedom, Tim Ballard. We're going to be talking with Tim Ballard here next week.
Wow, amazing. Well, thank you for bringing your energy. Let's Biden authorizes, right, military to call reservists to active duty to support Ukraine war. And, this is basically a legal document, right? So by the authority vested in me as the president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including Section 121 and 12304 of the Title 10 United States Code, I hereby determine that it is necessary, of course it's necessary, to augment the active armed forces of the United States for the effective conduct of Operation Atlantic Resolve in and around the United States European Command's area of responsibility, right? So, guys, I mean, to me, it's all theater and distraction. Just to bring it up really quick and get it out of the way. Last week, we covered Hunter the Junkie losing his bag of coke in the library. And if you still have any doubts, that was his. I don't know. Go do some coke. I have no idea where you've been sleeping at. He's even admitted he smoked Parmesan cheese, right? So most likely it is his cocaine. And my bet was that this is going to be all swept under the rug, James.
It will be.
Is it will be, or will we ever hear it about again, or is one of those, like, is straight up this story is to help mask the cocaine story? Is that how pathetic it is? Like sort of like the Clinton story in the Kosovo?
Yeah, I did the art of distraction here in politics. When you're hot on something and you're proving on the floor of Congress or Senate, and you're coming up with evidence. Oh, guess what? We have an incident in another part of the world which distracts the American public and international public away from them chasing down the crime. But it's funny about the cocaine. I had a friend of mine come up to me and say, this is going to be swept under the rug. And I say, yeah, more than likely will. But if I know Kamala Harris, she'll try to revive it somehow, some way, because she has a history with cocaine. So we'll see what happens.
We had that discussion, by the way. We did argue that. Well, how do you know it's not hers? And somebody commented, no, she's a drunk, and those two don't mix. I don't know. Well, although you do hear about people's going on benders, when they do coke, and then this. Yeah, I don't know. I still would if I would have to do a Las Vegas type of betting, that had to be Hunter.
It's definitely Hunter, in my opinion. But I just love the word salad coming from Kamala. she's comedic.
Well, they put her less on. They actually put more of Joe Biden on the screen when he talks versus her, because as ridiculous as it sounds, she sounds more ridiculous than he does. And we have some videos to show later of how Biden sounds. But okay, I have a video of Joe we need to watch. Just a second.
The sad news is you're in this situation. The incredible news is it's bringing the world together. It's bringing the world together in a way that it's a hell of a price to pay. But it's bringing the world together, and people are realizing that we just can't stand by and let this kind of aggression occur. At any rate, I thank you, and we got a lot.
What he's saying is that the Ukrainian conflict bringing the world together basically against Russia, right? And that's in Russia says in many different ways that you do need a conflict for NATO to be justified. Right, so in a way, it's like the vicious circle and the cycle. And what I believe he is right about is it is bringing the world together, but not in the way that he's talking about. It's bringing the world again together against this idiocracy that we've been buying into. My idea of this: you have the Vietnam War. Well, just I'm going to list a few. You know, you have the Korean, you have the Afghanistan, you have the Iraq, Libya, and all that stuff. Why would you believe it's different in Ukraine, James?
There's zero difference, to be honest with you. And his placations are driving most of America nuts in his call for unity across the globe. Meanwhile, everyone's dying on the streets here in the United States. And all that money that we sent over to Ukraine could be taking care of our issues. So I'm not an isolationist by any stretch of the imagination. No, zero. I believe in the treaties that we have in place. And in many respects, I kind of go along with Robert Kennedy Jr. By the way, he is running for president. He's actually a friend of mine. His unity message is clearly a message of unity. In this clown Biden has nothing. He's not thinking unity. He's thinking about profit. He's thinking about his next grift, because that's really what's happened here for us citizens watching what's going down. So his message of unity is just absolute full out lies.
Do you know? Okay, so Glenn, we hear talk about this all the time, right? When we say the losers of this war, the war is not against Russia. The war is against people. So people are going to die in many different ways. They are dying. They have been dying. And now with this whole cluster bomb thing, it seems like they're escalating the war. First of all, James, let me ask you this. Do you believe it is plausible, since you're a military man, is it plausible for them to escalate the war to a nuclear scenario?
Well, the trajectory they're on right now, we're looking at, it's almost inevitable. I do know that Putin did a little bit of research and study on Putin. You push him too far, it is game. It's definitely over. So I fear that. Hopefully, I do believe in diplomacy. They had an opportunity to work this out with Boris Yeltsin, John Johnson, and they just there was a reason why that didn't work. But here we are today. We're looking at World War III.
So go ahead, Glenn.
No, I had heard through the grapevine a long time ago that it's basically the militaries that run the country. It's not the politicians. The politicians are just there for the people. And the great military leaders, they've all agreed that they will never be a part of pressing the buttons, because there'll be no winners and everything will be at a loss. And so I don't believe in that. But also another thing is, I've heard that it's a good thing Putin is actually there, because he is more patient than the people who are waiting in the lines to replace him. And if they came to power, then we'd have a full-blown real problem. This is expanding into more of a problem. And if you notice, a lot of problems are coming at the same time as the world reserve currency, the US dollar, seems to be losing its rank as the big boy on the block, with the BRICS nations coming out in the third week of August to going to be saying that they're going to back their new currency with precious metals like gold and a combination of gold and silver. In other words, so whatever their currencies are, they won't be fiat anymore, which is fake, just printed into existence. They're actually going to be backstopped by something. And these nations have already created the equivalent of the World Bank and the IMF. So they're all ready to go on, and there's another 5 more countries that should be joining on right away with this. And this is the reason why you hear about all the central banks in the world amassing gold at a feverish rate, the highest rate that there's ever been, in preparation for all this. So a lot of this stuff that's happening on the globe is just distractionary from what is really going on. And that's a movement over to a new medium of trade outside of U.S. dollars, which could be extremely hyperinflationary for the American greenback.
Good point, Glenn. But if we return to the whole thing with cluster bombs, I mean this is a step in the wrong direction. This is not a step in the right direction. And cluster bombs, and the thing is why it's like a quickening, right? It's escalating really quick. Is you have they talked about it a week ago and they delivered it already now. It took them a week to deliver from the moment they acknowledged that. And we know the cluster bombs are, correct me if I'm wrong, James, the many war conventions are, the certain mines and cluster bombs are forbidden, right, to be used in the war.
That's correct. Yes, they were. Yeah, that's one of the many that they've put on the list of do not use. But, I honestly, I look at what Putin's doing and I say he's smart. He's very much like Trump in many respects, not to say they have political ideologies that are similar, but it's that leadership style. Hey, bring it. Peace through strength, if you can have it. If not, always be in a posture of strength. And that's what his response to the cluster bomb is, okay, bring it. I'm ready.
So the Russian war minister said that, military minister said, Russia has cluster munitions, as they say, for all occasions. So okay, bring it. We'll use ours. So that, exactly. but it's going to be used on who? It's going to be used on soldiers and people. So people like the sons and daughters, brothers and sisters are going to die. That's the set component. Do you guys want to know what fearless leader JT had to say about that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. To those who don't know, it's a Canadian show, and our fearless leader JT is Justin Trudeau.
Hi, Prime Minister. Sarah Ritchie with the Canadian Press. You just told us that the Alliance's commitment to human rights is ironclad. Is the use of cluster bombs a violation of human rights?
Canada is a signatory and was one of the leading countries on the convention to eliminate landmines and cluster munitions, and we continue to stand against their use.
But what about the Alliance?
Many members of the Alliance are signatories to that treaty as well and continue to stand against its use.
Basically, she asked the question. She said, JT, but okay, what about the Alliance? Why are they sending that's what I'm interpreting what she didn't finish. What about the Alliance? How come they sent the weapons, right? Because you're promoting the Alliance, which is NATO, right? You're promoting the Alliance like how we're good and how we need to maintain the NATO in the fight against the greatest evil of all, which is Russia, represented by Putin, etc. And now she's questioning, she's like, oh yeah, most of them are against it too. But why did you? The answer is no, it's not the question. The question is, do you approve of them actually sending it because they went there? And don't you have anything to say? The reason why he accepted it and he said it's so. How they pleased Justin Trudeau's administration with this? Why were they able to send the cluster bombs? I have a theory. They put a bunch of rainbow stickers on top of them.
Oh yeah. He definitely loves those rainbow stickers, doesn't he? It's funny from a U.S. or a California perspective. There's very little difference between Trudeau and Gavin Newsom. I mean, I laugh at both, but they're very dangerous. Who see what's happened to Canada, and I tell you, I have some good friends in Canada, which I do have two here right now. I consider you friends, and I take this. I don't take it lightly. Because you made a comment earlier, the last bastion of freedom is the United States. And really, that's what I've taken on as a sole mission since 2018 when I first ran against Dianne Feinstein to save our great nation in California. So let me tell you, I take everything very seriously, what's happening in Canada. And as we continue to work together, we're going to see some great change.
So Dianne, not so fine Feinstein, she's out now, isn't she?
Well, she's still sitting in office. She's thinking about resigning, and that unfortunately will put Newsom in the seat of appointing her replacement for the remaining of her term. And then we have three. Adam Schiff, Pencilneck, right?
Shifty Schiff.
Yep. Then we have a more Canadian, I say Cubana type communist Marxist, and that is Katie Porter. Now, if you can't miss her, because when she walks in, it's like three people. And then there's Betty Lee, or excuse me, Barbara Lee. She's been around forever and a day. She's a known socialist. But anyway, yeah, that's a lineup, and who could replace Dianne Feinstein if she chooses to resign before the end of the term.
So the person that walks for three people, does she eat for three people too? That means she probably has enough gas for three people as well.
That's right.
Well, in California, do you have?
She's a climate risk. That's what she is.
Do
right?
you guys have carbon tax in California?
I think I believe they were trying to pass it, and I'm not sure where it is in the legislative process. So, thank you for reminding me, because we're dealing with a lot of issues here in California. It's one of the many. So I'll check into that. I just don't know offhand.
Well, I'm just saying, if for some reason, if it is passed, make sure she pays 3 times.
Oh, it's good.
I'm just
see who says politics can't be fun.
It is fun. It is fun. We have to hold people accountable for the actions, right? Like we into consumption. We nothing against, right, Glenn? Here we're up for the consumption tax, right?
Yeah. It's ironic that those three people that you mentioned, they were probably the ones who were saying that if Trump wins, they're going to move to Canada. So Trump did win, but I guess they hung on and they said, okay, maybe we could still do a backdoor dealing and get into the Democrat office somehow. So you say it's up to Gavin Gruesome Newsom to pick the winner of those three?
Yeah, if she chooses to resign, and her health is. I have a friend that works on the staff, because I look at Dianne differently. She was when she was a moderate, she did phenomenal work. But, with this AOC socialist agenda, she had to go a little more further left than she felt comfortable. So I gave her credit for when she was in office and made right decisions. But she's at a point in her health now that she really seriously needs to resign. And God help us, who Newsom puts in office. And if it's Adam Schiff, people are asking me to run against these guys. And I'm going, well, let me think about it. So maybe we can take a poll eventually and see if I really should run against these nitwits.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you feel about Canada and, like, in terms of being the neighbor to the north? We obviously, like, if United States is the hope for the Western world, at least for the Western world, because we have, some BRICS nations that are hope for the rest of the world.
The free world.
The free world. But hope for the free world, United States is the one, right? There's no doubt about it, specifically based on original Constitution. How do you, in your opinion, how does the Canada fits into the whole, North American and the Western and the NATO scenario, being the neighbor to the north? And now with Justin Trudeau, like, let's say if you run for the government and you win, would you be a strong opponent of invading Canada, hopefully with the purpose of liberating Canadians? And
you mean annexing? I could consider that.
I'm suggesting we can annex Alberta at least. I'll move to Alberta. But the point is like, do you guys know that like this is all orchestrated? This is coming. The order's coming from above. Biden receives the order. The same order gets sent to JT. And JT, on the same day, sends army to where? Latvia. Like, to do what? At what expense? And how much does it cost? Okay, let's watch this video.
Military presence in the vulnerable Baltic region, with more personnel deploying to Latvia.
Well, today, I am announcing that we are going to more than double our presence, deploying up to an additional 1,200 members of the Canadian Armed Forces to serve and defend democracy and the rule of law. These additional personnel will reinforce and enhance our land, maritime, and air capabilities and support special operations in Central and Eastern Europe.
So the rule of law in democracy, James, can you comment on that? What rule of law in democracy he's referring to specifically here in Canada or California?
There's not in Canada that I'm aware of, but the United States, there are certain states that still believe in that, and I guess he's going to flee Canada and become an American citizen. Maybe, I don't know. I can't make sense of half of what he says half the time.
Okay, I know how. Okay, you guys gonna laugh, but I have an idea, right? So the same thing with cluster bombs. Latvia's first, the president is the first openly gay, and all of a sudden, we actually covered it last week in the episode. I don't know, Glenn, you see where I'm going with that?
We're seeing a pattern.
You see the pattern.
Definitely. And Zelensky too. Right? He's about as straight as a wet noodle.
So they sent they're sending unfortunately cluster bombs with the rainbow stickers on it, and now because we know for a fact that Trudeau's role in this whole World Economic Forum and the globalist agenda, he's the one responsible for pushing the LGBTQ plus to XYZ agenda, and you saw that. You see the interview with the Italian Prime Minister, the counterpart, when he's like, "Yeah, we're not really happy you guys not being gay enough in your country." So here, like, okay, you guys being gay enough, let me send you reinforcements against the evil Russians. And it's literally, I think, there's the connection. I mean, I'm being comical about it, but there's no other way to explain it. What is the 1,200 Canadian soldiers going to do other than to drain Canadian taxpayers? And those 1,200 soldiers need to be housed, fed, transported, and that's not just 1,200 soldiers. That's also all the supporting network around them and the equipment and everything else. That's a lot of money, James. Like you do say, like in the Pentagon, hammer costs like $1,000, right? So that's just another way of laundering the money, right? Is that how you see it too? Because 1,200 soldiers in Latvia is just one nuke away from expanding Baltic Sea. That really is like creating another Latvia Bay instead of having a Latvia as a country left. I mean, I'm being facetious. I obviously don't want any bombs go off, especially the nuclear ones. But it seems to me it's all a theater.
I think anyone that can fog a mirror, they can actually see what's happening here in the amassing of forces, Eastern Europe, aligning with NATO. But I could tell you from my whistleblower, it really became, because I was just like everyone else, hey, let's help out Ukraine. I knew nothing except for 2014 for the, what do they call it? The March for Dignity or something. That's the way they phrased it.
You mean according to Newland?
And
Graham?
So I knew very little bit about it aside from, hey, I thought some Ukrainian girls were pretty hot. Hey, let's date, But when it became real after doing my rescue missions, and I had a good friend of mine that was from Ukraine, say, hey, I have a good friend of mine that's still there. He's actually high up in government. I think he needs help. And I couldn't waste a moment. And I said, okay, give me the information. And I got my team in there, rescued his family, and here he is safe. But, since then, it's been a learning, and it's not too difficult to figure out. We know what's happening. If you can fog and mirror, like I said earlier, you can see where the money's not going. And now I know where the money's going. It's certainly not for the war effort. It's not for rebuilding the Ukraine. It's going back into the United States under a particular political party. So it's pretty nefarious.
And also some people's pockets as well.
Yes.
But the escalating, and also we covered it last week where you saw the weapons that from Paris was sending to Ukraine, conflict weapons, were ending up on the streets. And we can cover it in the next episode. There's a lot of now they're starting a race war in France. That's the next thing. That's the thing. So the pension thing still continues, and it's perpetually segues to another thing, which is. And meanwhile, Macron is going to the BRICS and trying to, figure out the way how he segue into the BRICS, because he understands that the greenback somehow is struggling right now with the Biden administration, killing it slowly but surely. And van der Leyen, is it a man or is that well, do you know its pronouns, James, by any chance?
Vendelin?
Yeah.
Vendelin?
Like, is it a man, like, is it even a human? Because she's sending more money to kill more of our brothers and sisters. That's why I'm questioning her humanity. Look, I'll show you.
And we are also here to show very clearly and send a message that the European Union stands by Ukraine. We have supported Ukraine in the last 16 months while this war is raging intensively, be it financially, by mobilizing 70 billion euros financial support. We give shelter to 4 million Ukrainians, and we have delivered military equipment in an unprecedented manner into an active war zone. Just this week, the European Union has adopted a bill to scale up the production of ammunition, very much needed. The goal is to have 1 million rounds, to produce 1 million rounds within the next 12 months.
So, James, they're very proud in how quickly they can kill people.
Yeah.
For the reason, for the reason they can launder more money.
Yeah, military-industrial complex right there. Let's just pump out some more armament and shells. Yeah, I just look at this and this insanity that is going on. Now, they said they've received 10 million refugees. Of the 10 million, who would actually want to go back to Ukraine now?
Almost none. As a matter of fact, a lot of them went to Germany, right, Glenn?
Yeah, and they say half of them would want to stay in Germany forever, so they don't want to go back. But with regards to what the politicians are saying, the European Union, they're not talking what the people want of all those countries. What they want is their government to stop sending money and munitions to Ukraine, because that's right in their backyard. And if things escalate, well, it's the European people who are going to pay the biggest price.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. The war is not actually against. If they wanted to stop the war, right, brothers and sisters, the best way to de-escalate the conflict, if you see two parties fighting on the street, two men, do you give them weapons? Do you give one a baseball bat, the other one a brick, and like, okay, you go, you'll stop, and then this doesn't work. The bat breaks, the brick crumbles. Now you give somebody a gun, the other one a knife, and see how quickly that de-escalates. Obviously, that's not the key. What do you stop? What do you do there? You pull them apart, and you're trying to talk some sense into them and say, yeah, go home and sober up. Right, or whatever, whatever the purpose of or the reason for the conflict is. So
yeah, see, I still to this day want to find out what happened in those peace talks between Putin and Zelensky. That was happened about a year ago, I think it was in 2022, February thereof, and something happened in that meeting, and I'm sure there was a backroom discussion. But the question is, was Biden involved in that discussion? I haven't a clue. But I see where Biden's going and all the war hawks, and we have them both in the Democrat and as well as the Republican Party. They want war. And I'm going, well, you be the first. You go on the front line. You learn how to address an arm. You look at your brother and sister falling, getting their head blown off. Then let's have a discussion. But they have no sense of morality, and those discussions of peace should be going on now instead of promoting war and Biden doing his proxy war with Ukraine.
Yeah, it's always easy for the leaders to, send money, send troops, send ammunitions, these cluster bombs, which 2/3 of all the countries, of the 195 countries in the world, over 2/3 of them don't want the usage of cluster bombs, part of the Geneva Convention. Yet these globalists just want to do whatever they want. It's the globalists against the people. And the people allow themselves to be divided through, let's say, a country, a border, or a skin color, a nationality, a religion, and that's how they control the people to let them fight amongst each other, and that way they can keep going on with their agendas. And their agenda is just making themselves even more wealthier, but also to create a one world government where it's a us and them, the few very wealthy and everybody else just striving to barely make it.
Yeah, that's a good analysis. Excellent. But again, going back to my original point, none of this, like this whole thing there's got to be a mechanism, right? This is not, first of all, printing money is, just legal counterfeit, right? The feds can just print money. Why do we pay taxes in the first place if we could just print money? In the same way, if for them legally to print money and steal money and to give them to the cronies and bail out corporations and companies, via taxpayers at the taxpayers' expense, the same way they need to have some kind of mechanism to continue to fuel this military-industrial complex, and one of those mechanisms is NATO. And for the NATO to be able to exist in the first place, they need an enemy, and that enemy was Soviet Union, right? And Soviet Union fell apart, and the language is important. Soviet Union was referred to as Russia constantly and consistently throughout its time. Like they knew it was inevitable for Soviet Union to collapse. When it did collapse, you still have the association. Well, the Russians are still the enemy. And it was an easy way to segue to make Russia the enemy when Russia stopped playing by the rules of the West. When Yeltsin was removed and replaced and Putin was elected, and all those George Soroses of the world were kicked out of the country for basically for stealing people's resources and destroying, the value of people's lives. And by the way, now the value of Russian economy is a lot greater than most of the Western countries at this point. Even with the most sanctioned country in the world, they're still holding up pretty good in terms of inflation and everything else. But why does NATO exist? Why do we continue to support it to exist? And unfortunately, I think was Trump, according to Trump, was Trump trying to pull out of the NATO altogether?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was trying to defund him the most part, like it did the Paris Accord.
And where do you stand on this, James? Like, what would you do? Like, is there a way?
James, if you were a politician right now in America, what would be your view on this Ukrainian-Russian conflict?
Diplomacy never dies when you have active, willing participants. They threw that out. Diplomacy won. Get back in front of each other. And only, I believe, Trump could do it. He could probably end the war in a minute. Let me make a correction. He just wanted everyone to pay their fair share on NATO because the United States was paying, I think, a good 85%, roughly. That's what I heard. So he balanced the scales a bit. Everyone have contributed. And during Trump, he started having them contribute more money. So that's what I say. Diplomacy never dies, but it only dies in a vacuum and amongst those that are pushing war. That's what happened.
So the last weekend that NATO passed, that's why all the Western leaders went to Vilnius, right? And that's why our fearless leader Justine sent all the troops there and more of a taxpayer money. But they passed a 4,400-page document. I wonder how much of that JT read, or Biden for that matter. Details the defense of critical locations in the case of an emergency, in case of a fear, what's emergency, and lists a potential attack by Russia as one of the biggest threats, according to German media. The Black Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has welcomed what he called the most comprehensive defense plan since the end of the Cold War. My question is, James, when I first came to the United States, and obviously I'm not going to hide my accent and my background. I grew up in Soviet Union, but I went to school in the United States, and I really love America for the things that I've learned and things that will contribute to my growth and the way I became a free man because I've experienced freedom firsthand at a time. Now it's not the same thing, obviously. You can agree with me on that.
I agree.
The question is, who won the Cold War? Because if maybe Soviet Union did fall apart, but where does China fits in? China's by 2075 predicted to be the biggest economy in the world. Glenn seems to disagree. Glenn, you disagree? You're shaking your hand. What's up? What am I saying?
I don't know. I that was the going. That was what they were saying, but I think that's fading into the sunset rather quickly. Personally, I believe the up and coming country is going to be India because of their demographics. China is now going to be entering a negative population growth. And so India is the most populated country in the world, but it's their demographics, the amount of young people that are going to create a lot of the jobs in the manufacturing that China was supposed to be taking over the whole world. In other words, China became what Japan used to be. Japan was the manufacturer of the world, and Japan has been in a recession, stagflation, for almost 3 decades now. And the Japanese economy is now turning down for the worse as you have a record amount of corporate bankruptcies. So that's the same thing that's going to happen to China. But China is not going to go down very easy. That's one thing for sure.
They've been buying up a lot of gold, that's for certain. And they're doing so.
What is the next conflict, James? Is it Taiwan? Is it going to because I think they killed Europe already with the economic sanctions against Russia. They were killing themselves, shooting themselves in the foot by like you said, send 70 billion, and then also increase the price of all of the energy sources that they get, right? And is Taiwan a conflict to watch, or is it the climate change?
The climate crazies. I love having that discussion. Yeah, Taiwan has been in threat. In mainland China just views it as part of China, always has. So they want to reunify it by force. The question is the timing, because that's kind of fallen off the news cycle because of what's happened. It's a question of when. It's not if, it's when. So we'll see. Hopefully not anytime soon. I do have a friend that's former military that is now there in Taiwan doing some work. So I will reach out to her and ask her that question.
Apparently, China's been getting ready for this a long time now. That's why they've actually built the biggest navy in the world.
Just for Taiwan.
Well, to protect themselves. That's what defense is. They're spending a lot of money on national defense, whereas the Anglo-American Empire spends money, they call it national defense, but it looks like it's more national offense.
So, guys, we've been discussing war here for almost an hour now, and we can go into details and all that stuff, but this is definitely war. But as we hear, me and Glenn always agree, it's the war against people by the elites, by the globalists and everything. And it doesn't matter where those people live, Ukraine, Russia, US, Canada, doesn't matter. We are the collateral. We are the pawns in the game, right? And the point is, Glenn, you want to say something?
Yeah, what you just said, we're going to prove it right now. There's 195 countries in the world, and a little over half of those countries in the world right now spend more on servicing the debt than they do on healthcare and education. Servicing the debt to who? That's the globalist bankers. They're the ones with their power and their money that put the certain politicians in power, where the people believe that they had a real democratic election and a democracy, and everything came out that way. They don't understand how the media controls the average person the way they think. And so what they do, these politicians, they get into the leadership of the country, and they slowly put the country in more and more debt to, let's say, the IMF or the World Bank or the Bank of International Settlements in Basel. And what these countries have to do now to make sure that they can pay the debt is pledge all their real assets, like ports and mining facilities, and all things that have real value, knowing darn well that they will never be able to pay off the debt, and all the things of real tangible value will be confiscated from these governments, which are supposed to be there for the people. Can you imagine?
Well, a perfect example of that would be Biden offered Aragon IMF money to ratify Sweden NATO bid. And it was, the Pulitzer winner Seymour Hersh, the one who wrote about the investigative journal about the Nord Stream explosion. And basically they offered anywhere between 11 to 13 billion so the Turkey can pass a bid to let Sweden into NATO. And that's, the reason why they didn't do it is because, Sweden likes to burn Korans. and Turkey doesn't like that. So, and they were offering to buy them. But he's like, no, I'm not taking IMF money. You're going to. And also, he is the gates to the Europe. He is the gates to the East, to the Asia. I'm talking about the Turkey, the nation of Turkey. So he can play both sides. He can play China, the BRICS, and Russia, and he can play America. Don't forget, they have the nukes stationed in Turkey. So he knows how to play both sides. I wouldn't trust him as far as I can throw him, really. But you're the military guy. You tell me.
Honestly, it's funny when you talk to former military, they try to distance themselves once they leave because there's a whole new world. It's kind of living as a free citizen. Well, not so free these days. But to give you a military analysis, it'll take some time regarding Turkey. I do know that there are a lot's going on there that it should take not too long to kind of really dig deep. My focus has been as of late is Nigeria. They had elections, and the favored candidate, that was another election. I'm trying to remember the term they were using in some like CNN. This is not an election, it's an erection. I'm going, wow, that's clever. I like that. We're going to start using that one. But that's what happened. That's what happened in Nigeria. So it's in the court system, and we'll see if the court system with the true. But anyway, I'm looking at that as a nation that is ripe for, besides the tribal infighting, they're looking for unity now, and technology transfers is one, agricultural build-outs. And why I'm saying this is that we're looking at Europe. Everyone and people, my friends in Scotland, say the same thing. It's gone. We lost Europe. What's the next bastion of freedom? Is it the United States? We're still holding on to it. Those like me, I'll never give in. I'll die on that hill to save it. But when people are looking at doing an exit from Europe, where do they go? I don't know if it's Nigeria. I think there's still a little ways away from that. Certainly not Turkey. But that's what I wanted to share with you, weigh in on what's happening.
Well, that's actually the good point. Like the whole world becomes a prison planet, right? Alex Jones. So the U.S. was the destination to come, and even Canada to some extent at some point, before it went all berserk and crazy. But you don't have those places anymore. Some argue you see actually a lot of American citizens, celebrities, even European celebrities and American celebrities, migrating to Russia for safety, tax sheltering, and also some ideological reasons, and also they make a lot of money in Russia. They don't be fooled, Steven Seagals of the world. They're not just moving there because it's, I wouldn't go past them either because they know how popular they are, all those 90s superheroes from the Hollywood, you know how much money they can accumulate by showing up and just signing the name to the things and all that stuff. So yes, I would say Russia definitely has a different value system, and it's more closer to what US was 30, 40, 50 years ago in terms of family value. Although here's why I'm not scared. I'm not scared of this, but why I can tell you that there's very limited outside of United States freedom available, because when COVID protocols were started and placed, it was every country across the globe. And United States slowly pulled back, or the certain states in United States didn't pull that thing, conservative states specifically. So U.S. is still the last bastion of that freedom, the way you look at it. Fortunately or unfortunately.
I'll still fight for it. Yeah, I'll still fight for it. So I wouldn't discourage anyone from coming to the United States. Let me clean it up first, please. I got a lot of work ahead of me, but if you want to be part of the fight, certainly, I'll give you my phone number. Yeah, let's do it. Have a lot of fun. We might have a little problem, because the police and law enforcement are not living by their oath of office, unfortunately, or the oath of service. So, yeah, we have a lot of complications here, but there is those of us like my good friend, General Flynn, who are still fighting the fight, and we will continue to fight it until it's either corrected or we die. But
yeah, James, there's going to be a lot for you to clean up, We're here in Canada, so we're on the outside looking in the window, and you're going to be obviously you're on the inside, so I want you to come back with, I'm going to say something I was just looking up. In the 2.5 years that Biden took office, back then the hourly wage adjusted for inflation was $11.39. Now, adjusted for inflation, which is really taken off, it's $11.03. So a decline of a little over 3%. Now, Bidenomics, his idea is expansion of government and massive spending that creates inflation, obviously, like spending, like sending money to Ukraine, for example, or paying off other people's debt that they incurred, that they're a little bit slow to pay off themselves. When you have other people who pay off, let's say, their school debt, that's the first thing they want to get out, is from underneath the school debt. So more government, more debt, less growth. That's what you have to clean up. What would you do to clean that one up?
Well, it's really simple. Sure, it's simple. I say it's simple, and it isn't, because there's a lot of you look at the landscape of politics. California is a good example of what's wrong with D.C., what's wrong with the United States. Having been in the belly of the beast here for a while, there's ways of unseating selected, not elected, selected officials. That's what we're putting in play today. That's the election process, and we're going after the machines because we know that manual counting works. And if you do studies of California, for example, we have such a large conservative base. In LA County alone, we have more registered Republicans than most states. So the reason why we don't win is because of all the laws that they have written that are unconstitutional. So I'm attacking that from a legal perspective in my lawsuit, but also there's a way to remove the machines that we're actually doing as we speak. So when you start removing those selected officials from office, you can get back and getting rid of some of these increment. Oh God, how do I describe it? Because I live this every day. It's like, wow, what else is new? What else are they going to throw at us? The gentrification, the gender affirming, which I call child mutilation. I'm dealing with that next week. I have a whole team in Sacramento fighting on this. So I do have a plan. It's a lot of work. The good thing is I have a great team that is doing exactly this. We're working together as citizens, soldiers, trying to save our families. So I'm going to rephrase something. We have the Republican Party. We have the Democrat Party. I'm representing the party of parents. So that's what I'm going at it. And we're taking back school boards, getting rid of CRT, getting rid of all this grooming documentation and literature that are in our schools. We're dealing with the vaccine mandates as we speak. It's it's so complex. But the good thing is I can multitask, oddly, from it, right? But the good thing is the other part is that we have people that have been doing this forever. So it's bringing all these folks together, coming up with a grand strategy, cleaning up the state of California, and boom, we have the first one down. And then everyone from the other blue states have a pilot called the Red White Blueprint. They get them deploy that in their given state. So I've been working on it for 5 years. I think we have a good plan. The question is timing. Can we do it before 2024?
Do you still believe that actually election could solve anything, or they're prepping the United States specifically for the Civil War?
You're right. We have such a large divide, and that's where Robert Kennedy Jr. speaks to as a unity, because he's going after the bureaucrats, which is just part of the problem, as we know, because you did your research. You know, Larry Fink's involved in a World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, the lobbyists, special interest groups. They control many of what we see today, these unconstitutional laws going into effect. The division is I've never seen it this bad. And I'm a Cold War vet, by the way. And I know what communism meant. I knew what communists was, stared it right in the face. And that's what we're seeing in America today. But we do have the right troops. I can tell you, we have motivated people. We have the right strategy. We're trying to start rolling it out here in California, be the test bed, if you will. It seems to be working in several counties. And through the cleaning up the mess, bringing in the real solutions, sustainable, and increasing people's quality of life, even the liberal loons, leftist crazies that I have to deal with on a daily basis and trolls on Twitter, they're going to say, hey, this makes sense. I could actually make money and not going to leave my mother's basement. I could make a living. I could pay off my student loan. So you got to bring the solutions that mean something to people. They can see it, reel it, and believe it, and do it. And everything comes naturally after you show a level of success, and they can live on their own. So there you go. That's a little piece of it.
Well, James, I'm up here in Canada here with Alex, and I have faith in America. I believe that the American men now are starting to unite. They're starting to become leaders again. Leaders for the right, and I don't mean right, left. I mean leaders for the right, not the wrong. And I have a faith that they're going to lead the free world again back to properness and prosperity. And this is what we're waiting for. And I hope that more men come out there like you and start standing up for what is right for the country, what is the best for the people, by going into government and representing the people, by the people, for the people, the way the Constitution was made, the greatest, well, the second greatest document that was ever written after the Holy Bible.
Amen to that. From your lips to God's ears.
Thank you, brothers, for being such good sports here today, and for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your knowledge, and your righteousness, and also your fearless attitude. Not be actually, you know, we spoke. I was on somebody else's podcast yesterday. We spoke about how difficult it is nowadays to be in the spotlight. It used to be a lot worse, but now I think we, as like surfers, we are catching the wave. And it's not, you know, maybe we are the wave. Maybe we are the wave that pushing all those other surfers to actually speak up and not to be afraid. Brothers and sisters, if you're watching this, we encourage you to be you. So whatever the values that you stand for, and you know the things that you're pushing, that are being pushed on you, like, you know, forced behavior, you know, Larry thinks of the world, just like James mentioned earlier. Don't be a victim. Be a leader, you know, and there's many things you can do, many different disciplines. And James, I know you can attest to many disciplines that you learned through being in the army. One of them is getting up early and get the stuff done before the sunrise. And by the time sun is risen, you're already a winner, right? And then you have the whole day to do even more stuff, right? But with what purpose? With what purpose? What is the idea here? And the idea is here to restore man, to restore family, to restore society. And James, I just want to thank you once again for being on our show today here at Alex Saz with Glenn Herring at the Glen Zone. And we're looking forward to seeing you here on weekly basis and maybe even daily basis, depending on what guests you're willing to bring to the table. And we do know you are working on your own show to release shortly, and we are looking forward to that as well. So, James, any last words before I'll cut you off because you are in California and we don't care about California?
You mean I have to get back to work? You're putting me back to work. Okay. Yeah, a lot of work to do. No, I want to thank everyone for listening, and I encourage everyone. You know, there's soldiers out there, there are leaders out there, like you were mentioning, Alex and Glenn. This is so important that now the real men stand up because they need us now more than ever. Now is our time, our calling. If not now, when? And when you're sitting back asking that question and coming up with an answer, you've already lost. So it's about action now, no more discussions. If you need to know where to go or you're looking for a good leader or direction, you know, there's a lot of resources here in the United States. You could go through Alex, ask him, let's get connected. Yeah, I know quite a few people through my time in space and some of the people that you probably saw them in the news. But honestly, I think now is the time to unite. You know, if Bobby Kennedy could do it and bring that message, and if we could put a ticket together with Donald Trump, damn it, let's do it. I think that's not anything's possible when you put your mind to it. And I certainly think that's a well worth effort. But I do ask everyone to pray for us, as I am for my brothers and sisters in Canada. And yes, I am a Christian, so I live by the word, and that's what I answer to the highest authority, and that's Jesus Christ above us. So I wish you all well and pray for your safety. And I'm here anytime. If you want to talk to Alex, come through me, or let's get business. Let's start doing the job. Now's the time. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I just want to remind all North Americans, something very important is to get to see that movie, The Sound of Freedom. That'll wake up a lot of people.
Amen,
Thank you.
bro.
Thank you, my brothers. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for tuning in to Alex Saz Show. And for sure, we'll see you on the next one.